Now, in the wake of Maine's heroin epidemic, its governor, Paul LePage, wants you to know who's really at fault and who's really the enemy.
Bad guy's a bad guy. I don't care what color it is. When you go to war, if you know the enemy dresses in red and you dress in blue, you shoot at red. Don't shoot. Ken, you've been in uniform. You shoot at the enemy. You try to identify the enemy. And the enemy right now, the overwhelming majority of people coming in are people of color or people of Hispanic origin.
So wait, we got to shoot at the enemy, and the enemy just happens to be blacks and Latinos. Oh boy. Hey, but he says those are the facts, man. I can't help it. We got to go after the enemy. Who's the enemy? Well, if you ask Paul LePage, he says, well, it's obviously, it's I just said it. Colored people and Latinos coming up and selling drugs. People like Shifty and D-Money. Look, Maine, yes, it has a huge heroin problem, right? But Maine's also incredibly white. Doesn't have a lot of black and Latino people, and I would assume they don't have a lot of black and Latino drug dealers. And look, I don't quite know the details on it, but I'm pretty sure that there's not a ton of people that are driving in from New York to sell heroin to people in Maine. I'm just saying. Now, LePage says, well, you've got to try to, if you're going to fight the enemy, you've got to identify them. Okay, well, let's identify the real enemy here, right? Now, in Maine, doctors had prescribed a lot of prescription opiates, things like oxycodone, oxycontin, and the like, right? Now, these medications are typically there to treat people of chronic pain, of intense chronic pain, right? Now, in 2012, the state's Maine care system tightened its rules for patients receiving these prescription drugs, basically reducing the numbers of prescriptions of these opioids to Maine care patients. All right, so you have a good goal, right? You're trying to reduce the amount of these prescription drugs being prescribed. Now, the problem is that, yes, you reduce the level of opioids and prescription drugs. The problem is that without a replacement, the people that were using these medications to treat chronic pain would begin turning to other things, to something to replace it. Now, heroin and a heroin substitute, fentanyl, happen to be incredibly cheap. Now, fentanyl and heroin, sometimes people think it's the same thing, it really isn't, are now becoming a substitute for a lot of these people that have been seeking pain relief and can't get access to OxyContin, oxycodone, and the rest of the opioids. Now, why are they seeking this? Well, some of them are legitimately, I'd say a lot of them are legitimately in pain, but there's also an addiction factor here because those prescription drugs are also incredibly addictive. So here you have a bad situation that was actually made slightly worse even with the best of intentions. Instead of getting prescription drugs, people, who need them or are addicted to them have now had to turn to illegal drugs that end up being far more dangerous. Great. And now this is getting a lot of attention because it's hitting the white middle class and upper class families in Maine, and it's hitting them incredibly hard. So what does this have to do with black people like Shifty and D-Money? Well, if you're Governor LePage, you think that the only people that are dealing drugs are blacks and Latinos. Oh boy. In fact, here's his comment from earlier about this thing.
I don't ask them to come to Maine and sell that poison, but they come. And I will tell you that 90+% of those pictures in my book, and it's a 3-ring binder, are black and Hispanic people from Waterbury, Connecticut, the Bronx, and Brooklyn. I didn't make the rules. I'm just telling you what's happening.
Except that you're kind of wrong. You see, you can't really follow up with that 90% claim. And look, It could be he's speaking of 90% of his notebook that he compiled that happened to show the pictures. And, oh, look, mostly they're blacks and Latinos. Interesting. But here's the thing, right? At that meeting, there was an attendee that argued that, look, maybe the fact that you got so many black people's pictures and Latinos pictures in your 3-ring binder thing, basically trying to show the proportion of people who are getting arrested for drug crimes, for selling drugs, I should say, is because Maine's police happen to be racially profiling these same people. Now, when this attendee said that, LePage flipped out. No, that's not it. That's not it. No, we're not racially profiling. No. In fact, he said, quote, there are a whole lot of white girls, too. A whole lot of white girls. In fact, almost every single picture is a white Maine girl in the picture. It's white people, a lot of white people, even though 90% of them are black and Latino. Wait a minute. First, it's 90% of black and Latinos, right, that are selling drugs, that you have as pictures in your binder of drug dealers. Now it's almost every single picture is a white girl from Maine. It can't be both. It cannot be both. Get your story straight, dude. Really. Now, Rachel Healy, communications director for the ACLU of Maine, she's going to attempt to point out this discrepancy and explain it. Now, she says, white people are statistically more likely to sell drugs than black people, yet according to the governor, police in Maine are 9 times more likely to arrest people for doing so. Seems like a contradiction, right? She also adds, we don't know what's behind this disparity, but we look forward to working with the governor to end any unconstitutional racial profiling that may be occurring. Damn. Not only that, but the ACL chapter of Maine also stated that their research tells them that both black and white people deal drugs at similar rates. Now, that's controlling for the amount of population, right? So, similar rates. So, look, it's likely that there's a combination of people that are dealing drugs in Maine. I'm sure there are some black and Latino people smuggling drugs, and likely white people too. The problem is, and it shows up in the disparity, is that blacks are getting arrested more often for it. And of course, a lot of research into the subject shows that when arrested, blacks often get harsher sentences than their white counterparts. Now, more white people do get arrested, yes, because there are simply more white people. But more black people end up in prison because of those harsher sentences. That's why you see that disparity, a lot of black men in prison. But LePage wants to ignore that. Look, heroin is a serious problem, and as I mentioned, it's caused by people getting addicted to opioids and not getting some sort of treatment for their addiction. The way to reduce levels of drug dealers is to reduce demand. More treatment centers, more programs to help drug-addicted families and people that are on prescription pain medication. That also helps. There are also things like physical therapy and less reliance on powerful medications. Those, I think, are a start. You got to start looking at those things. Not just going after the drug dealers, not going after D-Money, because when you shut D-Money down and there's still a lot of demand, well, guess what? Somebody else is just going to fill that spot. They're going to take his place. Drug dealers are simply a symptom of the problem, not the problem itself. We've got to start going after the real problem, and that's the demand for these drugs. Hey everybody, if you liked this video, then please like this video and share, and if you want to see more like this, then please hit that subscribe button below.